Okay, all right.
So we are all live, so we can. Yeah. So
Hello, um, good evening, everyone, from wherever you are joining us. I will be your host for this evening session, and I am Abdulatif Ogundipe, joining from France, not Budapest. Yeah. So, and today we'll be having a very interesting session, a very important topic in the field, in the cloud field, and we have a well-seasoned speaker to talk, discuss with us. First and foremost, we really want to apologize to you for having a little bit of delay due to the some technical issues, but it's great that we are able to overcome it, and we are glad to come to the study session. So, without further ado, I will like to ask our participants just to have some engagement just for 1 or 2 minutes before I introduce to us our speaker for today, who is going to share from his wealth of experience. Like I mentioned to you, I'm truly just joining from Valenciennes in France, and it would be nice to see people who are joining this study session with us. Maybe in addition to whatever else you are doing, which I can guess one most likely we are literally watching the Champions League final, but it's not a bad thing to gain two things at a time. As you are getting fun from one, you're also getting some knowledge because whenever we talk about security in the cloud, it's nothing to joke with. So, thank you, Obasoro Olakunle, joining from Lagos. It will be nice to get to know where other people are joining from. And also, it's also nice to mention that you should know after our study session, you will have the chance to pra- uh, uh, get participate in a quiz, and there are awesome gifts for you. So please, a good thing yeah you can do now is to try to inform your colleagues, your friends that you know will benefit from this, and send a reminder to everyone to join us so that we won't miss, no one will miss any important part of this interesting session. So, due to the little challenge we have, I won't want to take so much of our time. We're already past time, and our speaker has a lot to share with us. So, as such, today's topic will be implementing implementing least privilege IAM plus secure app secrets. And for today, our speaker, just as a brief introduction, will be Oluwaseun Alausa. And Mr. Alausa Oluwaseun is bringing its 8+ years experience in the field of infrastructure and DevOps engineering. He has had experience with delivering cloud native solutions and enterprise network infrastructure. He has proven experience in architecting AWS environments with Terraform, Docker, CI/CD pipelines, and as well as large-scale network deployments spanning fiber, voice over IP, and structured cabling. He holds several certifications, which include the AWS Security Specialty and Kubernetes, and he has a master's degree in computer science. We know with this set of introduction that I've read out to you, I'm very sure everyone joining this course should know that we have a specialty going to speak about a very important topic about the least privileged identity access management, identity and authentication management, and secure app secret. So I would like to not take so much of our time. Thank you, IJ, who is joining from Lagos too. Thank you for joining us. So you just joined us in time, and we hope others too will join. Please let everyone on the call try to call their colleagues, and so that we can participate in this program and also participate in the quiz session that will come after. So, Mr. Alausa Uluwaseun, thank you for joining us once again. We are glad to have you, and we would like to have you start your presentation. And yeah, we don't want to waste so much time again. Thank you so much. All right, you have the floor.
All right. Thank you so much once again for having me. It's a privilege to be here, and we'll try to stick with the time that we have. Thank you so much. All right. So, I slide very quickly so that we can begin a conversation. Okay. All right. So, all right. Okay. Okay. I can share my screen here now. All right. Let me know if you can see my screen.
Um, not yet. Okay, yeah, it's up. It's up now.
All right.
It's
So,
up.
okay, thank you so much. So what I have done, because of the time that we have, is that I've created a list of videos that I have published on my YouTube channel that relates to what we're discussing today, and I believe that the host would share that with us after the class so that we don't, because we don't have the time, and if we want to really go into the hands-on of least privilege, secure app secret and all that, I mean, we need maybe about an hour or two to really dig deep into that. So there are 5 videos on my YouTube channel that I have done that speaks to all of the things that we're going to be discussing today. So I've put that in a list to make it easy for us so that you can click on that and just practice. They're all hands-on videos, so you can practice that. All right, so today we are discussing about AWS IAM. We're talking about least privilege and secure app secrets. So I want us to look at this topic across 4 different levels, because I understand that many of us are at different levels in our career. Some of us are learning, some of us are already on a job, we're working with an organization, doing different things and all of that. So we're going to be looking at it in 4 different levels. The first one is going to be looking at it from a single account IAM point of view. What that means is you have a single IAM, you have a single account, a single AWS account. How do you protect your users? How do you make sure that people are not going outside of the permission that has been granted to them? And also we have the multi-account setup as well. When you talk about AWS organizations, in this case, you have multiple accounts, you have OUs, you have what you call permission sets, identity center, and all of that. And of course, we're going to be looking at SCP as well, which basically the idea behind SCP is just to it doesn't grant permission, but it basically allows or denies, access to certain things. But SCP by default does not grant permission. Then we'll look at secure secrets as well. So the agenda for today is to understand IAM fundamentals. We'll start with that. And of course, we move on to the single account IAM, the least privilege, and all that I've talked about. So first of all, let's understand the fundamentals of IAM, right? And it's a core building block when it comes to AWS access control. There's nothing you really want to do on AWS as far as security is concerned that IAM is not involved, right? So there are 4 things that I want us to understand. We have the principles, we have the policy types, there's the policy evaluation logic, and there's what you call the policy anatomy, all right? So the policy principles are basically, or the principles are basically who, which means who can assume this role, who can use this permission, those kind of things. Then you also have a role. A role can also be a principal, right? So principal here basically means the entity, right, that can assume a role, the entity that has the right to use the permission. That's what we're talking about when you talk about principles, right? And then an AWS service can also be a principal. Maybe you want your EC2 instance to be able to do something, your Lambda, your ECS, and all of that. And in AWS, you also have what you call the federated identity. when you talk about things like OIDC, when you talk about things like SAML and all those things. If you work in an organization where you use Identity Center, for example, right, what you are using behind the scene is a federated identity that is powered by SAML. Okay, and when you are dealing with CI/CD, maybe your GitHub Actions is deploying something to your AWS, your GitLab CI/CD is also deploying something to your AWS. What you're using to communicate for your GitLab to communicate with AWS is actually what you call a federated identity that leverages OIDC. OIDC basically means Open ID Connect. Okay, so those are the type of principles that you can have. So users, roles, services, and federated identity. Okay. You also have policy types. There are different types of policy. There's the identity-based, and you have the resource-based. Identity-based are attached to principle, which means you can have a policy associated to an IAM user. The user now is the principal that has inherited or that is assuming that policy. Okay. Then you have what you call the resource-based policy, which is attached to a resource. Now, the difference between an identity-based and a resource-based is that identity-based is attached to a principal. So which means when you see an identity-based resource, all right, or an identity-based policy rather, in the anatomy of that policy, you are not going to find a section that says principal. No. But when you look at a resource-based policy, one of the ways to differentiate a resource-based policy from an identity-based is that your resource-based policy will always have a principal. Now, what am I trying to say? When you create a user, the user is an authenticated user. That's the first thing. The user can log in, but the user does not have any access just yet, right? Now, in order for that user to do anything within your AWS environment, the user needs a policy, which will define what the user can do and cannot do, right? So you go to IAM, you create a policy, you associate that policy to that user. Now, apart from the identity of that user, the policy also provides authorization access to the user, which means it determines what the user is able to do, right? Now, a resource-based policy on the other hand, and a good example will be your S3 bucket. You have a bucket. Your bucket also has what you call the bucket policy. A bucket policy is an example of a resource-based policy, right? Now, you have this bucket policy. Now, that bucket policy must have a principal. The principal can be a user, like we see here. It can be a role, it can be a service, and it can be a federated identity, which means you are saying that this is the principal that can access this bucket. Right? So if the principal is a user, what you are saying is that this user, I'm giving you access to what? To access this S3 bucket. And that is why, when we started learning AWS, when you're creating an S3 bucket, you always have, the principal as asterisk, which means anybody, any principal, right? But of course, we know that that is not a secure way to protect your bucket. You have to define your principal explicitly. So what I'm saying in essence is that an identity-based policy is attached to a user or to a role. A resource-based policy is attached to a resource, like your S3, your EC2, your Lambda, and all of that. And a resource-based policy will always have a principal in its anatomy. Meanwhile, an identity-based policy on the other hand does not have principal in its own anatomy because it is actually attached to a principal. So it doesn't have to define a principal again in its anatomy. Okay, so now I don't know if there's any questions before I continue, so that if what I've said is kind of confusing, maybe you have a question on that before I move on. All right, any question on what I've just described?
We have no questions so far, but just to tell the audience that they should feel free to send their questions, and it will be the speaker will be alerted on it. So, but we have no questions so far. So, thank you. You can continue.
All right, thank you. So, and then under the policy type, you also have the permissions boundary, right? So, permissions boundary is actually a way to limit what a user can do, the maximum permission that a user has or a role has. So for example, you have a user, the user has admin access, but you want to actually limit the permissions of that user to maybe to just create IAM user or to just create S3 bucket. That is where permissions boundary comes in. Now, in addition to that, permissions boundary can also help you to prevent what you call privilege escalation. Okay, what does that mean? It means that if a user has admin access, that user can actually create other users and give them admin access, right? And that means, I mean, they can do whatever it is they want to do within your environment. But if a user has admin access, for example, you can specify a permissions boundary that limits how that user can transfer its permission, what the user can actually do with that permission. So which means your permissions boundary can restrict that user from creating users that have admin access. So even though the user has admin access, permissions boundary can help you to limit that power further to say, even though you have this privilege, you can't go beyond this. So that's one of the purpose of permissions or right boundary. And then you have your section policy and all that. Then there's the policy evaluation logic. In AWS, when you're creating any policy, right? Permissions are denied implicitly by default, which means until you allow something specifically, it is assumed denied. That's why in AWS, your deny will always override, anything. Right? If you don't specifically allow something, it is denied automatically. So that's the way policies are evaluated in AWS, which means if you deny S3, for example, it is denied nothing, except you now allow it specifically in your policy to say, okay, I'm allowing S3 for this purpose and for that purpose, right? So that's another thing. Then the policy anatomy basically just talks about the how the JSON is written. You have the effect, which is either allow or deny. You have the action, which is what the principal is able to do. And then you have the resource, which is what, the thing that the principal can actually perform those actions on, right? The targets. So if a principal has action, let's say S3 get objects, right? The resource is maybe an S3 bucket. So what you're saying is that this principal can get object in this bucket. So your effect basically determines whether the action is allowed or denied. So if the action is allowed, then the question is on what resource. Then another thing in the policy anatomy is also the condition, which is, are there any conditions? Which means, okay, this principal has been allowed to perform this action on this resource, but are there any further condition that the principal must fulfill in order for us to say that this principal has met all of the conditions and is therefore allowed to perform these actions, right? So that's where condition comes in. Now, in some way, you have to be very careful with conditions because it can be very complex and complicated sometimes. But it's actually something that provides you an extra guardrail so that your principal don't go beyond what they are able to perform. For example, one of the use cases for condition is when you are hosting your S3, your static website with S3, and you want to serve the content of that bucket with CloudFront, for example. If you have done a project like that before, you will realize that when you enable your CloudFront and then you select your S3 bucket, there's always a condition. And that condition basically says that yes, the policy has allowed CloudFront to connect to the bucket and get object from the bucket, but the condition will be there that this action and can only be performed if the request is coming from a particular CloudFront endpoint, right? So you always find that condition there. So that's the purpose of notice. Okay, this person has fulfilled this, but there's one more thing you have to fulfill. So if your IP coming from here, if your IP address is not this, then we will not allow you. If the CloudFront endpoint is not this, we're not going to allow you. So that is what the condition basically is about. But it's something that you have to carefully consider so that you don't lock out, your principals and other things. Then, of course, had a single account IAM. I think I've discussed identity-based, resource-based, and permission boundary. So these are examples of identity-based policy, right? You can see that the identity-based policy here does not have any kind of principle, but the resource-based policy has a principle, right? In this case, it's a role that we allow it, and then you have the permissions boundary and all of that. So I think you should have access to the slide. We can share that with you so that you can go through all of this. Then, when we talk about least privilege, which is one of the very big things in AWS, what we're saying in essence is that your user, your role, your OIDCs, all those kind of principals must only be granted the permissions that they need. In other words, no excessive or no extra permissions. That's what we're saying. So when you say least privilege, it just means don't give the person, more permission than necessary, right? I mean, a good example I like to use is if somebody is a gate man. I mean, if he is the gate man, right? His role should not extend beyond the gate. We shouldn't find the gate man in the kitchen trying to prep the meal, and all that. I mean, that would be overstepping his boundary. So that is, in essence, what least privilege is about, which means if this person is only to just go and shut down EC2 instances, that should be it, nothing more. All right. And of course, one of the things about least privilege also is that you have to be very specific and explicit when you are defining your permissions, which means no wildcards, nothing like asterisk, all those kind of things. No, you have to be specific. The ARNs must be targeted. You have to have your conditions in place and all those kind of things. So don't use asterisk. If it is get object you want to give get object. If it is put object you want to give put object. Avoid asterisks as much as possible, right? That's the whole idea behind least privilege. Now, when you come into the multi-account side of things, where you have the AWS organizations, usually you have what you call the IAM Identity Center. And the idea behind the whole identity center thing is that you are able to attach a user to multiple accounts, right? Most of us, I mean, when you're doing your practice, you have a single AWS account where you do your stuff and all those things. And then some companies, to maybe a startup organization and all, they can have a single AWS account where they log in, they create their users and all. But the idea behind organizations and identity center is that in a situation where you have development accounts, you have product accounts, you want to streamline the management of all of those accounts into a single, all right, under a single umbrella, right? You now have organizations, and then you have different accounts, and then you can have what you call OUs, which means you can have your development OU, you can have your workload OU, you can have your sandbox OU, and each of these organizational units will have their own accounts, right? And so one of the benefit also is that it can help you to centralize your billing, which means you only pay from a single account instead of paying from different accounts, right? You are charged just from a single account, okay? And another thing also is that you can aggregate things like your log, which means all the CloudWatch logs, CloudTrail and everything can be aggregated to a particular account, all right? And then your security as well. You can have your guard duty deployed in a dedicated administrator account, for example, and then other accounts can also be connected so that guard duty can protect them and all of that, those kind of things. So that's the purpose of the account setup. Now, in this kind of setup, you have what you call the permission set. Now, in the single account, you have your IAM identity resource based and all those things, right? Now, the same thing also applies here, but the terminology here is that you have what you call permission set. Permission set is still the same thing as your identity, policy and all those things. But the purpose of permission set is just to say, okay, I have a user. I want this user to access 1, 2, 3, 4 accounts. So you create a permission set with the different permissions and then attach it to the user and of course to the account. So when the user logs in, right, you can see, that permission set in action. The permission set and what the user can do in that account. You are not creating, policies independently. You are creating permission sets that can be applied to multiple accounts, right? So that's the whole idea of this. I believe we'll be able to have the time to look into this permission set thing, right? And like I said earlier, I've created a list of videos, 5 of them, that can actually help us to understand all the things that we're discussing today. So again, the purpose of the identity center here is to provide you what you call a single sign-on, right, to all your accounts that you have been given access to. Okay, so that's the purpose of this. And then you have your SCP. So at the organizational level, you also have what you call the SCP, which is service control policies. And what it does is that it allows you to define, to restrict things. Maybe, for example, you don't want your developer to deploy in a particular region, for example, or maybe you don't want them to spin up EC2 in certain regions, for example. Your SCP can help you to do that at the organizational level, right? Because things like that, you cannot use your normal policy to do that. You need what you call the SCP. So it's a way to just guard against certain things. And at that level too, you also find some terminologies like not action, not resource, right? So not action basically means you can deny everything except these actions. Not resource means you can deny every other resource, but not these resources. Okay, so those are advanced levels of permissions and privileges in AWS, right? But you have to also be careful, because once you apply an SCP at org level, it affects every OU that you have within the organization, right? I mean, even if you have individual SCPs at organizational levels, right? The one at the org level supersedes the one you have at the OU level. So you have to be careful how you define all of these things. And this is an example, all right, of an SCP. And these are the things, the key rules that you need to follow. Now, SCP strategy patterns, you have the deny list, you have the allow list. I mean, you have to know which to use and when. Now, the deny list is basically like the default. Now, when you set up an organization, your SCP will always have what you call the full AWS access at the root level, which means it's basically allowing everything, right? But by the time you start building, you start defining things, what developers should do, what this person can do, what this one cannot do, then you begin to deny certain things. For example, if you are an organization that works in EU region, for example, you don't want them to go and start deploying things in, maybe, let's say you work in the London region, for example, maybe EUS2, I think that's EUS2, yeah. So you don't want them to go ahead and start deploying things in EUS1 and all those kind of things. Then your SCP can come in that instance to deny, that access and all of that. Then you can also have the allow list to say, okay, I'm allowing the specific services, all right, to be used in this specific region. You can also have that, all right. But when you are dealing at an organizational level, you must have SCPs in place, all right, just to caution what people can do and cannot do. Because I mean, people can spin up resources and then they just forget that they spin up resources. But when you have an SCP in place, it can deny them access to creating certain resources and all those kind of stuff. And the beauty of SCP also is that even if that user, let's say the user has a permission set that allows it, or to create certain things, if SCP denies the creation of that resource, then it does not matter what permission that user has, it is denied. So at an organizational level, your SCP is evaluated first before the permission of the user. So if the permission of the user says you can do this, you can do that. If SCP says no, then it does not, what the user has in terms of permission does not matter. All right. Then coming to secure app secret. Now, in AWS, there are different ways to secure your applications, your secrets, and all those kind of things. There's a secret manager, there's parameter store, and there's IAM role. Okay. Now, in this day and age, right, in terms of user authentication and all those things, except it's just your own personal account where you're just doing some practice and all that, most organizations now, they use Identity Center. And they not only use Identity Center, they have, different identity providers that they use. For example, some use Entra ID, for example, as the identity provider. And what that does is that it allows them to use their user credentials to log in into multiple services that the organization actually use. Okay. When you use things, I don't think we've gone past that. So what you have now is that your user assumes a role. Now, when you create a permission set, like I mentioned earlier, when you're using Identity Center, which we're going to see, what your user is doing in effect when that user logs into the portal, what that user is actually doing behind the scene is that user is assuming a role to have access to your AWS environment, right? So there's nothing like access key, secret key, and all those kind of things. Of course, they can still generate one, but in terms of their login and all that, everything is moving towards, IAM roles more than you creating users. That's why when you log in into AWS and you go to IAM, it's always encouraging that you should use Identity Center instead of IAM, right? Because that is more granular, it's more manageable. You can have access to multiple accounts and all of that, right? Now, for the secret as well, I mean, I don't think this will be something new, right? It's not new information that when you are creating your database and things that are your API keys and all this kind of stuff, you want to store them in Secrets Manager, right? Because, I mean, you don't want it exposed anyhow. Maybe you want to rotate your database password, all those kind of things. You can put them in Secret Manager because, I mean, it offers a lot of benefits and protection. Okay. Now, you also have the parameter store. Parameter store, it's more of things that are not too secure, although it also offers you encrypted form whereby you can actually encrypt your parameters, you're right, with KMS and all those kind of things, but it is used for things that are less secure, maybe just API URL or something like that. But when it comes to secrets like passwords, database password, API keys, certificates, all those kind of things, you want to go with Secret Manager. Now, Secret Manager, yes, is more expensive than Parameter Store, but they all have their purposes. I mean, one way I like to define it is, for example, when you look at Kubernetes, you have config map, you have secrets, right? Parameter store is like your config map. Secret is like your secret manager, right? So, I mean, that's just an example. Now, another way that you can also secure your app, which relates to databases, is when you are setting up RDS on AWS, there's this option to use IAM authentication. Okay, that's also a very excellent way to secure your database and to actually grant access to your database, right? Now, I have a video that I've done on that as part of the list, so you can go watch that video and see how you can actually set up IAM authentication with your database to ensure proper security of your database. Because even if you generate a secret for your database and you put it in Secret Manager, right? I mean, there still has to be a rotation. You have to rotate the secret maybe every 30 days, every day. But when you use IAM authentication, the token is generated when the user wants to access the database or when the application makes a call to the database, right? So in that case, you are not bothered about rotating your secrets. Although you can have Lambda function that will do that for you to do the automatic rotation and all those things. But with IAM authentication, anytime a user makes a call to the database, the token is generated and it expires once the user is done. Anytime your application makes a call to the database, the token is generated and expires when the application is done connecting to the database. So that is more secure. And of course, it reduces a lot of overhead with Lambda and all those kind of things. Okay, so that's another thing to consider as well. So the key takeaways here are just, number one, default deny is foundational. I mean, every policy starts with deny until you explicitly allow something. Number two is that permissions boundary are the delegated admin safety net, right? It's just a way to say that, yes, you have this permission, but this is the bar, all right? Even though you have this, right? This is the bar. Number three here is the multi-account setup. You have the identity center, the permission set, and all those kind of things. And SCP are guardrails. They are not grants, which means SCP does not grant permissions. You cannot use SCP to say, I'm giving S3 get object to a bucket. No. It's basically a guardrail. A guardrail in the sense that users cannot delete bucket policy. That's it. User cannot create EC2 instance, things like that. So it's not that it's going to be granting permissions and say you cannot create S3 bucket, all those kind of things. It's just basically to say these are the things you can do. these are the things you cannot, all right, do. Then number 5 is never add code your credential, which I believe, even if you are just starting out, in AWS, I mean, you must have watched tutorials or videos that will tell you don't add code, all right, your credentials, all right, whether in instance profile, tax role, or pod identity, and all of that. You can leverage things like secret manager or SSM parameter store. Okay, now before we go into the demo, I would like to ask again if there's any questions before I just show you one or two things. Like I said, we don't have the time to do a full-blown demo, but I've created 5 videos that I believe if you go through those 5 videos, they're hands-on videos. It really helped to shed light on all the things that we've discussed here today. So any questions?
Yeah, no, as of now, I have no questions from the audience. I hope before you finish the demo, if anyone has any question, I think they will share with us. So maybe we can go with the demo, and we'll see if we have any question after. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, sir. So let me stop sharing that one. So let me share my terminal screen now. Just 1 minute. All right, let me know if you can see my screen.
Not yet.
Nice.
Yes, it's coming up. Not yet. I guess it's coming up soon.
Okay, is it visible now?
From my end, no. Maybe you can reshare and share again.
Okay, let me share again.
Yeah.
Okay, how about now?
Oh, I don't know why, but I can't see it. Let's see. Let me check. Okay, I think it's coming up. I
Okay,
think it's coming. I I can see it now.
okay, you can see my
Okay.
screen now.
Yes, I can see console home, recently visited, billing,
Okay,
cost
okay.
managed. Yeah, yes.
All right, so let's go into
Yeah, so just a bit of announcement to the audience. Please kindly send in your questions so that we can take it immediately after the demo session. We'll go for the Kahoot quiz, which we'll be having shortly after. Thank you. All right, you can go ahead. Thank you.
okay, thank you, sir. All right, so this is identity center. So I just want to show us the permission set in action, what it means, and all of that. Now, before you can set up identity center, you must have AWS organizations. You must have that set up already. That's the first thing you have to do. In some organizations, they have AWS organizations set up, and in some places they have what you call the control tower, which is the landing zone stuff. They have that set up as well, right? So, but you can actually have organizations without having control tower. All right, it depends on the strategy of the company. So the first thing is to have your AWS organization set up. Now, organizations, you're not charged for AWS organizations. It's actually one of the free services. All of the accounts under your organizations, whatever resource they consume, is what you are charged for. All right. So it's actually something you can spin up and then you add accounts to it. So here I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have like 5 accounts that I've added to my own organization, which I use for purposes like this. Okay. Now, when you have these organization things set up, of course, you must add AWS accounts. You can invite an account or you can add an account. So if I click on add account, there are two options. I can create an AWS account or I can invite an existing account. So all I need to do is to put the email address of the account, or if I have the account ID, I can actually put that here and I can invite as many accounts as I want to invite. Okay. And if you don't have, maybe it's a new organization, you want to create maybe one or two more accounts, then you can come here to create those accounts, put the name, the email address. And this is a very important subject, but we can't go into that today. This particular thing is very important, but we don't have the time to go through that today. And then you create the account. Now, once you create the account, of course, when you go back to account, you'll see those accounts, down here. All right. Now, when you go to your identity center, the purpose of Identity Center is that it works with your organizations. Your organization is where you have all the accounts in your organization. Identity Center is where you manage your users. And what Identity Center provides you with is the ability to map those users to different accounts that you have in your organization. That's the purpose of Identity Center. So that's where maybe I can use the word marriage happens between your users and the accounts. Now, in the regular AWS account that we have just individual accounts, right? And then you create IAM users, right? But here, now you can imagine if you have like 3-4 different accounts and you have a user that needs to access these 4 accounts. Now, if we don't have Identity Center, what that will mean is that you have to create an account for this user in each of the 4 accounts. So that means this one user will have to log in into these 4 accounts individually, right? But with Identity Center, one user can actually be connected or be associated with multiple accounts. And so the user does not need 4 or 5 different identities. They only need one identity. And that one identity can connect to multiple accounts. So that's the whole idea behind Identity Center. Okay. So now here you have users. Now here I have only one user that I use. So you have a user here and you can come here to add users. Now in companies, right, you actually, do not come to Identity Center to actually create users from here like this, really. Right? And that's where things like identity provider comes in, right? In some organizations, they use Active Directory. So they create their users in their Active Directory and then they replicate those users to Identity Center. In some cases, they use Entra ID. Some use Okta, for example, as the identity provider, and then they replicate to Identity Center. So the purpose of that is that because any user that I create here, for example, right, cannot log into other external systems that I have. It's not possible. But if my users are created in Entra, in Okta, in Active Directory, for example, if there are other external systems that support LDAP and OIDC and those kind of things, I can actually replicate those users to those external systems. So one identity can connect to AWS, can connect to any other service that I use within my organization. So that way, I don't have to have multiple accounts created. It's just one user, and then they can connect to different systems within the organization. Okay? And so, but for the purpose of what we're doing, we can actually come here to create a user, all right? And the user stays within Identity Center. But if I want to change that, I can come to settings here, for example, just for the purpose of our learning. I can come to settings, and here is where you have identity source. You can actually come here and say you want to change your identity source. So you can change your identity source to Okta, Active Directory, Entra ID, or any other identity provider out there that you want to use. So this is where you do the change. So that means if I change my identity source, what I'm saying is that I will no longer be creating my users in Identity Center, but my users will now be replicated from that identity source into IAM Identity Center. So that way, those users can now be associated, with permission set in Identity Center that will now give them access to any account that I want to give them access to. Does that make any sense? All right. So that's where you do the change. But for what we have now, we can actually just come here, add a user. And once you add a user, you put in the username. You can send an email to the user with password setup instruction. You can generate a one-time password as well and share it with the user. You put your email, confirm it, their first name, last name, display name. And if you want to fill all of these, you're free, but they're optional. All right. And then you can click on next to create the user. Now, once you create a user, of course, you're going to have something like this. Now, one of the things with Identity Center is that MFA is kind of enforced. Now, in the normal IAM, your single account, MFA is optional. Even though the console would give you like a yellow mark to say enable MFA and all that, but if you don't enable it, I mean, there's no problem. But when it comes to Identity Center, MFA is enforced. By the time your user is going through the user creation process and all those kind of things, they have to set up an MFA, right? And now MFA also, it depends on the company. There are some organizations that they use the software version, which is the like OT, Google Authenticator, and all those kind of things. And some organizations, particularly when you work with GovCloud and all those things, you have what you call the MFA keys, right? That they give you like a token, just like in Nigeria, we have what you call the bank token, your hardware token that you can. So they give you something like that. So you have that with you every time. So when you want to log in, you press your token, you put in the ID, and then you're able to log in as a second form of authentication. Okay. So once you have the user created, now if I click on this user, I have different tabs here. There's profile, there's group, there's account, there's application, there's MFA, there's active section. All right. Now, under the profile, of course, you have the user profile, and then you have the group that the user belongs to. So here you can create different groups. Developer, billing, all those kind of things. You can create different groups. And then if I click on the user, I have AWS accounts. Now, this is where I assign accounts to my user. All right. So here I have AWS accounts. So here I have 4 accounts that I have associated with this user. If I click on assign accounts, right, I can come here and I will see different accounts in these, organizations, and I can see the permission sets. The permission set is where you define the permissions that user can actually assume in the account that allows them to do and define exactly what they are able to do. Okay, so here you can select any account and say, okay, I want to assign these accounts to my user, and then you click on assign, and that's it, right? But let's go through it step by step. The first thing you do, under here you have AWS accounts. Now, this will take you to, it will show you the AWS organizations and show you all the accounts that you have in that organization. That's the first thing. Then you have what you call permission sets. Now, this is where you define what permissions your user has, what they can do, what they cannot do, similar to your policy in IAM. So here you can create permission set. Now, there are 2 types. There's predefined, there's custom permission set. Predefined is more like your regular permissions in your regular IAM, where you have the admin access, all these predefined permissions that you really cannot edit. You can't do anything about those ones, right? These are the predefined permissions that you have. Custom permission set is you have to define your own permissions. Now, there's something about this that you must take note of. If you want to use custom permission set, now, this is how permission set works. Predefined works across any account. Okay, let me explain this. Any account, which means if I create administrator access, all of the accounts, they already have admin access, right? So I don't have any problem. Now, if I want to use a custom permission set, the way it works is that you have to go to the account that you want to allow the user to do log into, do whatever it is. You have to go to that account, create a policy, right, in that account that will state what the user can do and cannot do. And then once you have created the policy in that account, you copy the name of the policy. And then you come here to your custom permission set, you say next. And now here, you can actually still associate managed policy, right? You can associate that here. But if you come here, there's what you call managed, customer managed policy. So here, you click on attach policy and then you put the name of the policy you have created in that account. Now, the problem with this now is that this customer managed policy does not apply to every account. Because number one, the account ID is different, which means if I create a policy in one account, I cannot use that same policy in another account, right? Except I give it a uniform name, which means if the name of the policy is ABCD, it has to be ABCD in all the accounts so that that same customer managed policy can be used across all accounts. But if I call the customer managed policy in one account ABCD and then I create the same permissions in another account and I call it CDF or whatever, then the name does not match. So that means you can't use that same customer managed policy for another account. It won't work. So if you want to use one customer managed policy for all of your accounts, then they have to be the same name across all the accounts. But the challenge is you have to create it in those individual accounts. Of course, that's where things like Terraform, automation, and all those things comes into the picture. But for the purpose of time, we can actually just select administrator access. And then you can also see the permissions boundary here as well. You can also say permissions boundary to this one also. And then I can go next. And then I can call this admin access user group. All right. And then of course you can determine the section, be 1 hour, 2 hours, whatever. And then you can say next. And of course you can create. Now, once you create your permission set, this is the permission set we have created, and you will see here it says it has not been provisioned. It has not been provisioned means it is not associated with any account yet or any user. That's what it means. Now, what this permission set does is that by the time you associate it to an account, it creates a role in that account. So when your user logs in, what your user is doing is that they are assuming this role. And once they assume that role, whatever permission that role has is what the user has and determines what they can do. All right. So now that we have a permission set created, let's see how we can apply this. So you can go to AWS account, for example, and let's say I want to associate to this one. So here I'll click on this one, assign users and groups. So I'll come here. This is my user, this guy, this is my group. So I can say, okay, I can assign a user, I can assign a group. So if I assign a group, of course, it means that every user under that group has been assigned to that account, right? So I'll click on that and then I'll say next. So here it's going to ask me which permission set do I want to associate with that account that user would use and all that. Now, I'll select this guy and I'll say next. Now, pay attention to something. The name of this permission set is admin access user group, right? I'll say next. Right now, remember two things. We selected an account and then we went next. We selected a group. The next thing we did was to select a permission set. So what we are doing in essence is that permission set is going to be provisioned in that account. That user also, or the group that we selected, will also be given permission to that account. But what the group can do is determined or dependent on the permission set. Okay. So I'm going to go and submit, and then you'll see what it says. It says configuring your AWS account. It says we provisioned your AWS account successfully and apply the updated permission sets to the account. Now, when I go back to that permission set, what do I have? If I refresh this, it tells me it has been what? Provisioned 2 minutes ago. Now, the question is, how will this user log in, all right, and use this permission set to access that account? Now, let's take a look at how that can be done. So here, I can come here to, let me just open this incognito tab. All right, so now I will come back to my dashboard, okay, and I will pick up my login URL. So this is the login URL, all right, so you click here. I hope you can see my screen. Can you see my screen, please?
Yes, definitely. Yes, following. You can see your screen. You are in the sign in
All right.
dashboard.
Okay, all right. I just wanted to be sure that you can see that. All right. So now I'm in the login page. So the user that we want to use to log in now is this guy because we've attached another permission set to this guy, right? So the user is going to be, so the username is going to be this. So this is the username. So I'm going to copy that and put that here. I'm going to say next. So the password, of course, the user must have a password. So I think I still remember, hopefully. All right. So now it's asking me for the MFA. So I'm going to pull up my Alt-C MFA and connect to this. Where are you? Okay. All right. So this is my MFA code 965590. All right. So I'll click on sign in. Okay. Now, once I sign in, it takes me to this access portal and it shows me the 4 accounts that that user actually has access to. So if you go back here, you will see that the user actually has access to 4 accounts, right? Now, the process I just went through with us now is actually the process by which you assign a user to an account. I mean, that's what we have done. Okay, that's what we just did right now. But of course, I have all these accounts already associated with the user and all that. But the process we did now is exactly what you would do when you want to associate a user, all right, to an account using Identity Center. Now, if I come here, I can see this is the user that we provisioned a new permission set for, right? This DevOps account. So I can come here now and expand this DevOps account. Now, under this DevOps account, I'm going to find 2 permission sets. One is admin access user group, another one is administrator access. Now, this is the new one that we just provisioned. And for each of these permission sets, I can generate access key and secret key. Right? So if I click on this one, it's going to basically do what? Signing into that account using that permission set. So in essence, what the user has done is that it has inherited, all right, or it has basically assumed that role. Now, how do I know that it has assumed a role? How? If you come here, for example, now you will see it says what? A federated user. AWS reserved SSO, admin access user group, blah, blah, blah. Now, when you see this in any account or in any environment you find yourself, just know that you are logging in with what? With Identity Center. Anytime you see AWS reserved SSO, all right, that tells you that this is Identity Center that you are using. So you're not using your regular, all right, console login. Now, if I come here to IAM, for example, now I'm going to see that that role was provisioned in this account. So if I come to roles, for example, now look at it. This is the role. Reserved admin access, all right, admin access user group, and then the number that was generated. So if I click on this, now look at what it did. This is the permission, admin access. Now, although that is broad, all right, but of course, this is just for the purpose of demonstration and all that. If you come here to trust relationship, now this is the part that I want you to see, right? You can see that this principle. Now, one thing I need to mention here is that your trust relationship, your trust policy is also an example of a resource-based policy. I mean, in case you go to an interview and they ask you, what will you say about a trust relation? Is it an identity-based or a resource-based? It is a resource-based policy. It is not an identity-based policy. And the simple way to know is you can see the principle is what. So this is a resource-based policy, and it's federated, and it tells you the ARN of the principal. You can see that it's using a SAML provider, and it tells you that do not delete this. And then the action is STS assume role with this tag session, and then the condition. So if you are not logging in with this URL, then forget about it. So if your login is not coming from the AWS portal, then you cannot log in. That's what it means. All right. So that's what this condition is doing. Okay. And you can see that the only thing here is what is assume role. That's the only thing in the trust relationship. And it means that what this role can do is ultimately determined by this permission. So if the permission is admin access, then that's it. But if the permission is something more limiting, then that's it. Okay. All right. So I just, showed us this to see how you can actually apply the permission set, and now you can use that to log in, all right, into different accounts. Okay. Using Identity Center. All right. And of course, the last thing I wanted to show us here is now, for example, if maybe somebody has left your organization and you want to remove them, from the Identity Center, you don't want them to have access to that account again and all those things, how do you do that, right? That's the last thing that I just want to share with us. All right. So now we have this permission set that we have associated to a user, to an account, and the user has left the organization and all those things. Of course, if you come here, for example, now and say maybe you want to delete the permission set, right now, it won't go away just like that. So the first thing you have to do is to detach it from the account first. It says the permission set is currently provisioned in one account, remove it from that account, and then try again. So you have to go to the account. All right, and then of course, this is the account here. You can see the permission set. So you can select that account. All right, click on the account, go to the permission set, select the permission set, and then remove that permission set. So you delete it. So that way, all right, so once you remove that permission set is gone. So the user that is using that permission set will not be able to use it again anymore. And then you can go back to your permission set and say, you know what, let's delete this. All right, and okay, let's refresh. Still seeing it. All right, now you can see that it is now not provisioned. So now we can come here and delete it. And of course, you just copy the name of the permission set. And what this does is that the moment you delete the permission set, automatically the role that was created, all right, in that account is automatically deleted. So if I go back now, for example, if I refresh this page, for example, let's say I refresh this. If I come here, I will see that that permission set is gone. Even if I log in with another permission set, if I go to the IAM section, I will not find, all right, that permission set again there because I've removed it from that account and I've also, all right, deleted. So if I go to roles now, all right, you can see it's no longer there. It's been removed. So that's how you had permission set, and that's how you revoke as well, right? If that permission set is no longer needed. So that instead of leaving something that somebody can take advantage of, right, you quickly remove it so that even if somebody wants to use it, it's gone. So they can't use it to hack into your account or do anything that is not authorized. Okay. So thank you so much. I believe we've learned something today, even though, like I said, we really cannot go into, hands-on. So that's why I've created a list. Like I said again, it's part of what I shared with the organizers, so they can send that to you, and then you can go through those videos to help you really gain a better understanding of all that we have discussed in the slide and what we have just done. So thank you so much. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Mr. Shion, Lua Shion. Thank you so much. It has been a quite insightful session so far, and thank you for the hands-on. And I want to believe our audience has really gained a lot. And they will really agree that the introduction that was done really met the expectations with the explanations, like the confidence in the explanations, and even the hands-on really shows so much that you're able to give us during this session. Thank you on behalf of the audience, and I have seen several audience sending in their gratefulness. Mr. Sheon, before we go into the chaos session, there's just a question here in the chat, which the person asked when working with and creating this. I guess he's talking about the identification. Does AWS charge the user? So I would like you to respond to that question. Thank you.
All right. So you are not charged. No, so when you create AWS organizations, you are not charged, but the resources you create in the accounts, right? That is what you pay for. So if you're using Identity Center, you're not charged for setting up Identity Center, right? Ultimately, what AWS charges you for is the resources. So if you create an EC2 in an account, set up S3 buckets, do a lot of things, that is what you pay for. So you don't pay for Identity Center, you don't pay for AWS organizations, and all these things. But the resources that you spin up in those accounts, EC2, EKS, ECS, all of these things, those are the things you pay for. So the same way you don't pay for creating a policy, all right, on AWS, it's also the same thing. You don't pay for setting up Identity Center and all that. But when you do set up any resource, EC2 and the likes, all right, you would have to pay for all of that. So that's what they charge you for. I mean, I've had the AWS organization running since 2022 thereabout. So that's about 4 years. And I don't think I've paid for organizations, even Identity Center. I think that was about 2023 thereabout, and I've not paid for it. But when you do create resources like EC2, EKS, ECS, all those resources, yes, you would have to pay for those ones. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that. I think that was pretty straightforward. Yeah, you don't pay for using creating user with the identity and access management, but the resources you pay for them. I think that's okay. I think Mr. Robot in it one got that. Thank you, saying thank you. All right, it has been over an hour, and yeah, just not to take our time further, we want to once again appreciate our speaker. I think from the chat, there's no further question. If there's any, you can still forward, but prior to that, while we are awaiting that, we'll just try to share this information about the Kahoot, the quiz session. So I will be sharing my screen so that we can see the link that we are going to join for the Kahoot, and it will be coming up soon. All right, so please, with the game pin that has been shared, 5604325. We would like the participants to join in so that we can check our knowledge on what have been done so far, and for the best performance. I believe there are some interesting goodies that we will be giving to that person. So please, let's join, and we await other participants to join. And as we are also awaiting the participants, if you have any question, please feel free to share in the chat. I'm sure Mr. Luashion will be happy to answer you. So I'm waiting for the participants for the quiz to join so that we don't take further time. Uh, okay, we are still waiting. It's not seeing anyone. At least I've seen quite a number of persons send message who has been following us with the study session. So it's time to try to check our knowledge and see. Is there anyone joining? Okay. The code once again is 5604325. I think people are multitasking. I think people are managing the study session with the Champions League final. But yeah, you can benefit from the two at the same time. Yeah. Okay, we have one of our participants, Mr. Robots. Let's see. Let's see who will join in the next couple of minutes, and we'll see. Okay, we have IJ. Okay, thank you for joining. I hope we're going to have an interesting and competitive session, but definitely it's just a check for knowledge. And I believe for anyone that has followed this session should be able to answer because Mr. Oluwashe was kind enough to really break down a lot of concepts in clear times, and the acts on really reinforced a lot of theoretical concept that he shared. So we are hoping that the listening to the theoretical presentation and trying to follow the hands-on will make it easy to answer the questions that we'll be having for the quiz. So we just have one participant. I think we had two at some point. At least we should have quite a number of persons join. I believe it will be more interactive, it will be more interesting rather like that. Okay, we have Mr. Robot again. Okay, we'll just wait for 1 or 2 more minutes because time is fast spent. We will want to take so much time, and we will go with audience that we have. If it's going to be between two persons, at least let's see. Okay, in the next 1 minute, we start the quiz. So if anybody is trying to join, please join. And on the screen, information about our social media handles is being shared, where you will see the next scheduled study session, as we'll be having another study session next week. The I want to encourage everyone to join, and definitely the LinkedIn sessions, the YouTube sessions will also be helpful for anyone that needs information about the activities of the AWS Security West Africa. Okay, I think the other participants left. Let's just okay. All right, we start without any further ado. Okay, so the question goes thus. All right, an IAM role has a permission boundary that allows only S3 EC2. What is the effective permission? So, so please, that's the answer. That's the question. An IAM role has a permission boundary that allows only S3 and EC2. The identity-based policy attached to the same role. Okay, all right. So we have a someone who got it right, and the answer is I am create user only. Identity-based policy override boundaries. I think Mr. Luwashe will emphasize this during the course of the presentation. So kudos to the participants who was listening actively during this session. All right, let's see. Let's continue and see what we will have. We have Mr. Robot. The scoreboard is it updated? Okay, let's go ahead. Let's see. All right, for question two, we have that which of the following is a unique advantage of a resource-based policy, and the options are shown on the screen. So we have about 15 seconds to choose the answer. I'm sure people that followed will have cited the answer and choosing it right now, hopefully fast enough because it's about an accuracy. Oh, I don't know what's happening. We got no response. We got no response for that question. Is it due to network or something? Okay, let's see. Let's see. Maybe people were unable to answer it within the time. Okay. All right, but the correct answer is resource policies can grant cross account access without requiring principal. All right, so let it's the scoreboard is saying 0-0, but the first question someone got it. Let's see, maybe the technical issue will be sorted at the end of the game. So the next question, the question goes: a service control policy at the root OU explicitly denies EC to terminate instances. The management account has an identity-based policy that allow EC to terminate instances. What happens when management account tries to terminate an EC2 instance? So I'm reading the question because I had to read it, and the options are listed there. So, and the correct question answer is the action succeed SCP, as SCP do not apply to the management account. So this is another key takeaway from the lesson that we had, and it's showing that no one also choose the right answer. I don't know if this is a technical glitch, if this is a technical glitch from outside, but at least seeing the questions and the answer is also a way of testing our knowledge. So we'll go ahead to the next question. The next question says an SCP with effect, deny, and non-action S3 CloudWatch is applied to the workload OU. What is the result of a member account developer who tries to create an EC2? And the answer is action is blocked. The deny applies to all action except S3 and CloudWatch. So we have one of the participants of the quiz who got it right, and let's see who that is. Oh, finally we found the score on the board. Mr. Robot. All right. Thank you for. It's glad that you were able to get that answer right. Okay. The last question. Let's see. You are deploying a containerized application on Amazon EC2 Fargate that needs to read a database password stored in AWS Secrets Manager. What is the AWS recommended most secure options and most secure approach rather? So these are the options. Please select the correct one. Oh, no option was recorded to be picked by any of the participants, and the right answer to this is to assign an ECS start role with secret manager get secret value scope to secret ARN. You can see that the questions that we have for this are quite technical, and it requires people that pay close attention to the study session. So we had two participants, and IJ couldn't answer any question, while we have Mr. Robot who was able to get a question. And congratulations to you. Thanks for participating. I really want to appreciate Mr. Robot, the user with Mr. Robot, and IJ for participating in the quiz. I'm sure maybe due to some technical glitches, that was why this, because it happens sometimes, but we will try to look into it in our upcoming session. It's very strange for such things to happen, but nonetheless, thank you, Mr. Robot. I think the email that you are seeing on the screen, AWS Cloud Sec West Africa at Gmail, please kindly send your name, your details, send an email to it, and the winner, the gift for being the first position will be forwarded to you accordingly. So please don't forget. Once again, next week is another week, and I have the honor to inform you that I will have the real opportunity to speak with you next week. And I want you to, it for especially for people in the AI, AWS AI field, come and see how we want to try to protect our generative AI in the AWS cloud. And I really want you to look forward to an insightful and interesting session. So we want to final thank you for people that participated, and it's really nice. Will be I need to stop my stop sharing now. Okay, so once again we thank our speaker, Mr. Alausa Oluwaseun, for the uh, well presented lecture and this answer session. It was very insightful. Yeah, Mr. Robot, I can see your message that you had some internet problem. Yeah, I noted that too. It's understandable. So next time, and congratulations once again. At least you were able to answer one and missed all the difficulties that you had. All right. See you. Enjoy the rest of the Champions League final for those watching, and I hope we're able to gain one or two things from this lecture today, especially a very important topic, which is about identity and access management in AWS. All right. Thank you. Ciao. Bye.